Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Scruffy Movies podcast. I'm Zach Wallace.
And I'm John Crocker.
And today is a St. Patrick's Day celebration. We are actually recording this episode on St. Patrick's Day today, this Sunday, but it will, of course, be released tomorrow. But we've decided to celebrate some movies that are not necessarily all about St. Patrick's Day, but more Irish-fueled and themed, and those would, of course, be the Boondock Saints movies.
Oh, yes. I cannot think of a more Irish-fueled movie than the Boondock Saints. That's a good way to put it.
I mean, they literally celebrate St. Patrick's Day and the beginning of the first one, and it ends up, it basically what sparks the entire movie is St. Patrick's Day at a pub, and then, of course, a couple guys come in and start causing some ruckus, and the brothers won't be having any of it, and that kicks off the entirety of Boondock Saints.
Yep. And what was the bartender's name? Was it Patty? Something similar?
Yeah, something similar to that.
Yeah, or either the bar was Patty's, something like that. Again, stereotypically Irish.
That's It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. I think his name was Doc. I think they called him Doc.
Okay, maybe I'm wrong.
God, we have showed how extremely prepared we are for this episode the first, 30 seconds in.
There is a Doc listed on the top billed cast, so
yeah, that's probably him.
Probably it.
I swear we've seen the movies before.
Absolutely. Though I will say it has been years since I've seen Boondock Saints 2. I believe that one was All Saints Day.
Yep, that's that one. Yeah, that one is. I enjoyed that one. I guess we'll just go ahead and kick off our conversation talking about that one. I enjoyed that one when it first came out, but then hearing some more opinions on it and stuff and kind of giving it a few rewatches of my own, I still enjoy it. I like a lot of the action, and I like the more fleshed out story they try to bring to it with their dad and everything, but it's incomparable to the first one, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree. When it first came out and I first saw it, I thought that it was a good enough entry into the franchise to be the second one, but it was obvious even at first viewing that it was nowhere near as epic as the first one was. You know, it still had a lot of good action. I agree that it had probably a better story. I mean, that's probably one of the main critiques of the first movie, is that they just kind of repeated the same thing over and over and over again in the original Boondock Saints, whereas the second one, they actually tried to come at it and make it a real movie. And I mean, maybe that actually caused it to miss a little bit of the charm that was the first one.
Yeah, because I think there's a lot to be said about that first movie. Have you heard of all the production troubles and stuff they had on that movie?
Well, I know that there was production troubles. I know that it wound up not going to theaters, or if it did, it was in theaters for a week or in only a handful of theaters. And then when it hit DVD, and since it has, of course, become a cult classic and made millions of dollars, but up until that point, it really just was almost a flop before it even had the ability to flop.
Yeah, there's actually a very interesting documentary. I believe it's called Overnight, but it chronicles the making of the first Boondock Saints. And the writer-director of both of the Boondock Saints, Troy Duffy, he basically, Boondock Saints was on the Hollywood blacklist or something like that. It was a very sought after script, to the point where 20th Century Fox was going to make it. Warner Brothers was going to make it at one point. It was going to be a big action. And this guy was basically unheard of, and they were giving him all these deals. He was the writer. He was going to be able to direct it, and he was getting all these deals. At one point, Ben Affleck and Matt Damon were going to play the brothers or something like that, some variation of that. And so it was going to be this huge, big blockbuster movie, but Troy Duffy got too kind of big in the pants for his own situation at first and was yeah, first-time guy, they're going to let me direct it and do all this stuff. And he just started burning bridges left and right. He's I want $50 million. And they're we'll give you 45. And he's just because you said that, $60 million. And just started tearing shit apart. And to the point where every huge studio dropped him. No big actors were going to be in it. He finally made a deal with this little studio and was able to finance it for a lot less than what he wanted to make it for. and just had to hire basically no names at the time, with the exception of like Willem Dafoe. Everybody else in that movie, nobody knew who they were when they were cast in it. So it's a very interesting documentary. I had no idea about all of those troubles that it had, but I think that's where some of the charm comes from, like what you were mentioning, because you kind of see like the low budgetness of it all. But I think that more lends to seeing the struggle of the McManus brothers more than if it was like a big, slick, big budget movie, you know?
Yeah, it was Daryl before it was Daryl. Which, you know, when I watched the first Boondock Saints movie, it doesn't reek of low budget like a lot of low budget films do. Like there's no scene in that movie where I think to myself, man, I can see how they were limited here and how they cut corners, you know, because it was a lot of like on scene in Boston, which I'm sure is probably not actually where they shot it, but it was a lot of scenes that were filmed like in bars and clubs, in dark rooms and houses, and the tools were, you know, basic tools of the trade, you know, guns and ammo and that type of stuff. There was never a point where I was like, man, they definitely were limited by the budget. So they did a great job with that small budget of not making it feel like it had a small budget. But of course, the actors in the film, I mean, no one knew who any of them were. I didn't, other than William Dafoe. And even back in those days, I may have recognized him as someone I known, but would never have been able to say, oh, he did done this, and this, you know?
Yeah, it's funny now because I feel like all of the actors have been so successful, like retroactively, like after the movie came out, they've been successful, that now people who hadn't seen the Boondock Saints before, who've like known about like Spider-Man, would be like, oh yeah, Green Goblin's in this, or who have seen Walking Dead are like, oh yeah, Daryl Dixon's in this. Whereas me as a kid, like when The Walking Dead was announced, they're like, yeah, and Norman Reedus, and I went, oh sweet, he's one of the Boondock Saints brothers, awesome. So he was like the one I knew going into it, and now everybody like basically only knows him as Daryl Dixon.
Yeah, that he definitely will live the rest of his life as Daryl. He's one of those actors that, because of the popularity of The Walking Dead, he will be like shoehorned into that character for the rest of his life, even though I would say that there's probably more people out there that would recognize or would say that they have seen and watched Boondock Saints. There's probably more of those people than Walking Dead, wouldn't you say? But he's probably more just like known for the Walking Dead character. I don't know. Maybe I'm totally off base on that.
I don't know. I think definitely more Walking Dead. I will tell you this. I have been to at least like 5 or 6 Walking Dead conventions, but I have been to or have not heard of. I've heard of 0 Boondock Saints conventions. So I believe Walking Dead is the winner for that.
That's true. I guess, I don't know. I think if I'm in conversation with someone and they say they haven't seen Boondock Saints, I say you have to go home tonight and watch that. And if they say I'm not a Walking Dead fan, I just go, yeah, okay.
Yeah, I can see it. Yeah, I understand.
Yeah, you know?
Yeah, I totally get it. And I'm a huge fan of both of the series too. I mean, I proposed to my wife at a Walking Dead convention on stage with Walking Dead actors. But yeah, still to the point, I feel like I would say the same thing, where if somebody was like, I don't really like Walking Dead, I'd be like, yeah, I see where you're coming from. It's definitely dropped off. It's gotten a little bit better. I always suggest, I'm like, yeah, if you're interested, you should really check it out again. But yeah, Boondock Saints is one of those where I'm like, what do you mean you haven't seen the Boondock Saints? What? Were you alive in like 2007 to 2012? It was huge.
Yeah, which is crazy because, I mean, that's like the time that I remember it being required viewing for like me and my friends. Like there were so many references that we made to the Boondock Saints during those few years that if you hadn't seen it, you were left behind. But the movie was almost 10 years old at that point. So, you know, when it hit DVD, did it become instantly popular, or did it take almost a decade before people realized that it was even out there?
No, it definitely, it was not very popular when it was in theaters or anything. It's kind of the same as Scarface. Scarface, another one of those movies that's stuck around for a long time, kind of dealing with similar content in some respects. But Scarface also flopped at the theaters. And then once it came out to home videos, when it really started to kick off. And I think Boondock Saints kind of started to kick off as soon as it was released, but it was more running in like the film lover circles. And it took that extra couple years to actually break through like pop culture circles to like regular circles as well. I think it was always big, like running within the film circles. I remember seeing it. My brother showed it to me when I was a kid, and I had seen it way before a lot of people even knew what it was, because I remember asking kids in like middle school and stuff, hey, have you seen the Boondock Saints? And they always thought I was talking about the Boondocks, the Adult Swim TV show. And I was like, nope, not that. But I think it just took those extra couple years to like actually break through the barrier of enough film people have talked about it, that enough pop culture people talk about it, that now it's finally like societal.
Yeah, in film culture, I could definitely see it being big because it was almost like what I would expect to be, and this is going to sound like a knock, but it's not a knock on it, is like a watered down Tarantino film, the way it was shot. You know, it's like you kind of do have to go back and watch it at least a couple of times to see everything. There's just this weird like cat and mouse dynamic with the brothers and the cop and William Dafoe. And you get a lot of that sort of going back and forth. The scenes would go from either before or after an event and then flash to like what happened during the event. So there was a lot of like having to kind of keep up. But I could see that in the movie circles with sort of the movie fanboys out there, that was really kind of cool and maybe actually drew their attention more than most.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I think this definitely kind of ran in those like Tarantino type circles. Like I said, my brother showed it to me and he loved like gangster movies and stuff like that. So my first exposure to a lot of that stuff, like you said, so it's funny you related to this, but like the first time I watched Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction and all that kind of stuff was when my brother was like, hey, do you want to watch this instead of like Small Soldiers, what I was gonna watch? And I would be like, all right, is it a funny movie? And he's like, no, it's not.
Yeah, I would. It's hard to even like pick other movies out there that you can put in the same grouping as this. I think Reservoir Dogs would be a good one.
Yeah, I think a lot of like 90s Tarantino is a good one, especially the like the non-linear timeline of everything.
Yeah, and I know that there are a few like darker Robin Hood-esque sort of vigilante, you know, live in the shadows, is we kill people but we kill bad people type of movies out there. I just can't think of any that really come to top of mind.
The Punisher.
Well, yeah, that's a good example. But I think most people now would relate that to the show.
That's true. And in the show, he's not even really just like he's not just killing bad people. At least in the 2 seasons that we got before it was canceled, he was killing people for a reason. He wasn't just like, you're bad, now you're done. He was just, unlike Boondock Saints, where they have the revelation of, hey, let's just kill bad people. You're welcome.
Yeah, and you even get a little bit of like a precursor to that in the very beginning too, because there's the church scene that sort of kicks off the movie, and it's one of my favorite scenes where they kind of walk out the back and they both put a cigarette in their mouth and use their identical Zippos, and you see their identical tattoos on their hands and their necks and all of that. But when all of that is happening, the priest says something along the lines of like, watch out for the evil in good people. Mm-hmm. And it sort of sets up the tone for the rest of the movie, which is one of those things that the first time you watch it, if you have no idea what's coming, you have no idea that that's, you know, even something you need to pay attention to, much less something that's going to set the tone.
Yeah, and that's kind of a little bit of why I like some of the twists this movie takes too, because it shows like even their dad, like the twist in the first movie of the assassin hired to kill them ends up being their father, was like it just goes to show you that everybody, no matter who they are, has that touch of good or evil in them, and all it takes is like one push to go either side.
Yeah.
Because their dad was a bad guy. Like he was just like killing people for money. He's like, yeah, pay me money. I got them for you. Until he realized what his sons were doing. And he's like, oh, good point. I'm with you guys now.
Yeah. And his whole like outfit was just so awesome. Like if I were to pick something to recreate to wear to like a Comic-Con or something along those lines, it would be high up there on my list of options, with his big trench coat and sort of the, I don't even know what you call those old hats. They're like golf hats, but the most badass thing is all the holsters on his chest for all the pistols. Like instead of just carrying extra magazines, he carried 6 pistols on him. I loved it.
And I also love that leads to one of the best, I think, gunfight scenes we've ever had in an action movie, in a movie, let alone an action movie.
Outside the house.
Yeah, there was a firefight. That scene, and Willem Dafoe the whole time is like, yeah, it was, I think he said, yeah, it was 6 guys all shooting at them. But no, it was just the one dude nailing them the whole time. And I really love the action of it all. And I love, especially in the first Boondock Saints, where Willem Dafoe is in the action scenes, but he's like recounting them. So it shows him like doing motions and stuff and it affecting the scenes, but it's just like what they did actually in the scene itself. I like that a lot. I really like that one.
Yeah, there's always the scene you see where he slides down on his knees and he's got his 2 hands out in front of him, like holding the guns out, and then you actually see the guys masked up next to him with, with their face covered and everything else, like actually representing what happened. And they're sort of in tandem recreating the entire scene. I mean, there were a lot of awesome scenes in this movie like that, especially in the first one with William Dafoe. He brought so much to the movie, his character, but also when he like puts in the headphones or the earbuds or whatever, and then like dances through as things are getting shot up, as he's sort of visualizing it all in his head. I mean, it was really awesome, because again, it gets back to that cat and mouse thing where the story of the brothers would not be as potent if it weren't for the cat that was coming after him,
Yeah, and that also kind of goes back and touches on the good and evil thing. He is inherently good, and so he's having the moral conundrum the entire movie, not sure of what to do with the brothers, because he believes in what they're doing, but he can't outwardly express that because he works with the police and it's his job to catch them. And then at the end, you kind of see him like, oh, well, they're doing the right thing, and he starts helping them out too.
Yep. Now, was it in the first one, or I should know the answer to this, was it in the first one or the second one where he dresses up as a girl to get in the house?
Yeah, that's the first one.
That's what I thought. Yeah, so he does end up kind of teaming up with him there at the end.
Yeah, and then in the second one, he's apparently dead the whole time until you see him at the end, and he's basically teasing what a third movie would be, but he's saying that, oh, there's this big like syndicate of people who believe in what the McManus brothers are doing, and we're here to support them. Now you're a part of that syndicate too, and stuff like that, which I don't know if I really like that very much. I don't like that there was a syndicate behind them. I feel like, and of course we haven't been able to see anything that's like has the syndicate in it, so it could end up being really good if we ever do get to see a Boondock Saints 3. But I feel like the brothers work best when they're kind of low to the ground by themselves. They're getting outside help from people, but I feel like they're the best when it's just them doing their thing.
Yeah, I mean, that was the entire point sort of the first movie, is that they sort of took it upon themselves on the most ground level you could possibly be, to do these things. So if it came out that they were bankrolled by a syndicate or, professionally trained or like any sort of big organized crime backbone, or I guess organized good backbone, it just wouldn't be as good. It would take something away from it, because they're like their almost like common folkness is again one of the points of charm.
Yeah, and I think that is a big point in the movie of kind of being like, these are just two brothers who felt the need to do this. Like, they are proficient in weaponry, but that's just because they've been like fighting all their lives and they just know what they're doing. But they're just two regular guys. I mean, they worked at a meat factory before they were just like, yeah, you know what? Let's kill all the bad guys in the city. So I think that also leads to some of the charm of it, of just having two regular people be like, we're going to stand up for what's right, and going out and doing that kind of stuff. Whereas, yeah, if they were bankrolled by this big thing, it would almost be like, oh, so this is like a job? I don't like that.
Yeah, I mean, there was one scene, and I can't remember the word they used, but I think it was when they were actually in the police office, and someone said, like, I want to say vigilante was the word they used, and the brothers just kind of looked at each other like, oh, I guess we are, aren't we? Like, they, it never even dawned on them that they were doing something that had a word associated with it, much less something like that,
Right. Yeah, and that's another thing I like, and we talked about it a little bit with the dad, but just a lot of the like unexpected twists and turns that this movie takes, and it really all stems from the fact that the cops are either exactly right about what happened, but nobody believes them, or the cops believe like what they think is the most logical thing, and then almost every time the brothers have done the exact opposite thing, because they're not bad guys trying to like run away from the law. They're just good guys doing what they feel is right.
Yeah, and there's a few times where there is this was done by, X amount of professionals, and then you show them like with their feet accidentally tied up in the rope and they get like hung, right. It's like, no, they weren't professionals. In fact, it was a nowhere near perfectly executed thing, but they just so happened to come out on top, and I love that.
Yeah, that's the other one I like that is when they go into the strip joint type place and Rocco just starts shooting people, and the detectives are like, wow, we found bullets from gun A over here and bullets from gun B over here. This guy went absolutely crazy in here. And then it shows him like not really knowing what he's doing and just being like, and like crossing his arms and doing stuff.
Exactly.
Just trying to like look cool, but they're like, wow, they're professionals. And he was just trying to look neat.
And gratuitous use of slow-mo definitely helped this film out too, because some of those scenes just look so awesome, and a lot of that has to do with the slow-mo.
Yeah, I have a tendency, if like just movies I made in college and stuff, I would always have a tendency to put things in slow motion because I thought they just look cooler in slow motion, and I think this movie is definitely one of the reasons of that. I feel like if you took out all the slow motion of this movie, the movie would be like 45 minutes.
Yeah. And there were a lot of scenes, talking about a 45-minute movie. Like, I feel like there were a lot of scenes, maybe not a lot, but a few key scenes they put in that added a ton to the film, but did like zero to the plot. And obviously the number one example of that is when Rocco shoots the cat.
Yep.
Like, that did nothing for the movie at all, but it would be a lesser movie without that scene.
Well, yeah, that's just them being like, that's you getting an insight to them being themselves. It's almost like when you get to see Bruce Wayne in the Batcave, or like doing like just out on the town doing stuff. He's not Batman. He's not doing anything like to further his Batman career, but it just makes you feel more connected to them, like it lends itself more to the everyday manness of the trio of them, and especially the two brothers and everything. It just lends it more to like, oh, they're just like cool guys that hang out, and he shot a cat. Not saying that shooting cats is cool. Shooting cats isn't cool, but just like hanging out, having a few beers, and then he accidentally does that.
Yeah, I think he slams his fist like down on the table, and the gun goes off. So it's like this is how unprofessional these guys actually are.
And it's like blood is like splattered all over the wall. And then he gives the famous line of, "Is it dead?
Is it dead?"
Like, of course it's dead. Well,
I was going to say another. No, you go first.
I love in these movies that, and we've talked a little bit about this, that they are the good guys and everything, but they might be doing bad stuff. I kind of like it. It happens at the very end of the first movie, but kind of the conundrum that it presents in the citizens, because, you know, a lot of people would be like, oh yeah, good guys, but not everybody shares the same opinion. And I like that they kind of put that in the movie to make you think more about it, because there are a couple people that are like, no, they're murderers. What makes them better than the guys they're killing? They're just killing people. And I'd like that they present it that way, because that's 100% the way it would be in the real world. Not everybody's going to be like, oh yeah, you guys got it. Whereas a lot of people are, but there still are those people out there that are like, no, they're terrible. I'm scared to do anything because I'm afraid that they'll come after me.
Yeah, that's one of those undertones throughout the movie that, again, sort of adds a ton to the movie, is the ability to leave the audience member not necessarily knowing where they would even fall, you know, if that were to be happening in their town. And it's definitely something that sort of kick the feel, the look and feel, and really sort of how hard it hit you. It really amped that up a notch. And, you know, we see movies do that today as well, with like even in Marvel movies where half of the movies, you know, they're fugitives, and in half they're not, you know, because again, they're killing the bad people, but they're out there destroying cities and that type of thing as well.
Yeah, and I like that they do that, because as you're watching the movie, it's easy, because it's following them, to kind of lose sight of that fact. It's a very similar tone that The Devil's Rejects has, where it follows serial killers, but it follows the family. You're almost rooting for them to get away until just like a couple points throughout the movie, like they bash somebody's head in, and you're like, oh yeah, they're the bad guys. It kind of subtly reminds you, but then that also kind of plays with your emotions, like what you were saying, of what you believe is actually good and what you believe is actually bad. And it kind of speaks to you on a bigger level than just being a movie.
Yeah, and it reminds you that this is taking place within a greater world, especially like with a superhero movie. It would be so easy to just make a movie about, you know, what the superheroes are doing against the villains, and sort of forgetting the fact that all of this happened in New York. But instead, with like Marvel, they double down on that, use that as a big plot point in a lot of the other films. And it would be a lot easier in Boston, because these two guys were such street level guys, and they were sort of requesting the help from their friends and, you know, doing super street level stuff. But it also is there to sort of remind you that, hey, you're in a big city, and yeah, there's the mob and they are bad guys, but now you are sort of towing that line.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the, and it's funny that we're kind of mentioning it like this as a point that we liked, but that's kind of what Batman vs Superman tried to do, and everybody hated them for it. So I think it's good that it's happening in a movie where it's more like shooting people and serious action than like superhero movies, because I can understand the conundrum of superhero movies, but I feel like seeing this movie and being able to relate it to the real world is different than being able to watch like a superhero movie and relate it to the real world, you know? Like I feel like the themes in this movie can almost hit home a little bit better, because like we've been saying, they are just legitimate, like everyday guys who pick up guns and start doing stuff in our world, basically.
Yeah, the gun shopping scene is one of my favorites.
Oh yeah.
They sort of the most stereotypical, like if you were writing a comic book or a TV show and you were like, okay, black market, like room full of guns with a guy sitting on a stool in the corner, you know, like making sure you don't steal anything. What would that look like? That is exactly the scene I would paint in my own brain.
Yeah.
With just the big like tripod actual machine gun is the center point of what's going on the set. You know, it's like rope. We'll never need rope.
Yeah, and then they did need rope, and that leads back to like the professionalism, but it's just guys who are accidentally falling into place the way they need to.
Yeah, it's definitely a everything like falls into place as it needs to type of a movie, which I could see that being a critique as well, is that like literally everything just happened in the best possible way for them to get them where they are.
Well, yeah, but that kind of goes along with the story, because in the story of it, they are inspired by God. So that leads to the bigger question of like, is God actually helping them? Is he making these things like go okay for them, you know?
Yeah, the religious undertone is definitely there. Everything from, again, that opening scene to sort of the charge from God, and then the prayer, every time they're about to pull the trigger.
Yeah.
What does that sound mean?
I was wondering, I was like, I guess he's just not going to say anything about it. Maybe he didn't hear it this time. That sound means it's halftime. Woo-hoo! So halftime, if you haven't listened to the show before, is part of our show where Crocker and I just take a break from the conversation we're having, and we take some time to talk about recent movie news, movies we've seen, things we're excited about. And also during halftime is when we've been giving away our digital codes. And of course, this week we're going to be giving away another one. This week's movie is going to be Mission Impossible Fallout, the brand new Mission Impossible movie that just came out. Extremely good movie. Very, very good Mission Impossible movie, and kind of fits into the action and gun shooting firefight stuff of Boondock Saints, I guess. That was my connection to it. But if you would like to win that one, all you got to do is type the code word into the YouTube comment section below. The code word is going to be cruise. If you type that into the YouTube comment section below, or send that to me as a direct message on Instagram at Scruffy Movies. Again, the code word is cruise, and if you comment that or send a direct message to me, you'll be entered to win a free digital copy of Mission Impossible Fallout.
Good movie.
Very good. Mission Impossible has been killing it lately with their movies.
Yeah, action from the time you turn it on to the time the credits roll.
Yeah, the past three have been just absolutely incredible.
All right, so who should kick off halftime this week?
I think we're going to end up having at least a couple of the same on our list, so why don't you go first?
Okay, so first and foremost, something I'm massively excited about is that we now have an opening date and a lot of information for Star Wars Galaxy's Edge at Disney World in Disneyland. So I know the one in Orlando will be opening in August 30th. I believe in California it's going to be opening in like May, so it should be a little bit sooner. But they just dropped a ton of information, like the names of some of the attractions, sort of how everything is going to work, what a lot of the shops are. So, of course, you can buy your Jedi robes as soon as you get there, and they're like super high quality, Jedi robes that you could wear for the rest of your life kind of thing is what they're saying. It's not just like something you throw on over the top of what you're already wearing to just kind of, fit in. Like these are going to be pretty legit. And apparently they want that to be kind of a big thing, is that when you get there, you get your robes and your lightsaber and you pick whether you're going to be light or dark. And that will sort of dictate what happens to you as you journey through the rest of the park. They also dropped a lot of information about like the food and the restaurants and all that are going to be there, which I didn't dig too deeply into. I could care less what flavors the popcorn are at the popcorn machine. But that's going to be pretty huge. I think it's going to be awesome. I don't go to Disney World very often, but I will soon be making a trip for no other reason than to check out the new attraction, see the new hotel and everything that's going on with that. And I'm just super pumped about it because it's something big that's happening in Star Wars world. And I know a lot of people are just upset that Disney has their hands on Star Wars anyway. But I'm willing to give them a break and go see what it's all about. Because I bet that actually in Disney World, Disneyland, they've done a fantastic job.
Oh yeah, that's since they've announced that, that's been something I've been extremely looking forward to. The only Star Wars thing I remember is that when I went to Disney, they had like the Star Tours, and that was like one of the highlights of going to Disney. So having like an entire land dedicated to it, where basically you walk in and you're in Star Wars, is going to be incredible.
Yeah, and it's one of those areas where they're really like doubling down on the immersion aspect. Like they want you to journey through this as if you were sort of playing the part of a Jedi or a smuggler or something like that, which is really cool. That's not something I feel like we see a lot with the Disney stuff. Usually it's very much of a like attraction based. You are still yourself from the outside looking in. Maybe a lot of the animal parks, those definitely have a lot more sort of a safari feel everywhere you go, and your rooms and restaurants and all of that. Whereas this one is just, I can't wait to see what they do with it, because it's nothing that I've ever seen anyone do before. So they will truly be innovating, I believe.
Yeah, and I remember seeing, like, when they were announcing stuff, that there will be, like, the hotel on site is going to be an entirely immersive experience, to the point where if you wanted to just stay in your hotel the whole time, you would basically be living in Star Wars for a weekend. Like, all of the windows and stuff look out to space and everything like that, and everybody will talk to you as if you're living in Star Wars world. Like, none of the Disney people will help you with, like, Disney stuff. If you're like, hey, how do I get to Magic Kingdom? They'll be like, what are you talking about? And stuff like that. So you'll be, like, entirely immersed in that world staying in the hotel, which is extremely cool to me.
And if you're wearing gray and black robes instead of, like, brown and tan, then they'll react to you differently as a dark Jedi. That's so cool.
Yeah, that is really cool.
So sort of second thing I have here that I felt like it was related because of Defoe is that I finally watched Aquaman.
Oh my gosh.
I know. And just to give a quick little recap on that, because I said we would back when we did the DC podcast, I thought it was on par with Wonder Woman, which is obviously my favorite DC movie so far. And a lot of the critique, if I do have any of Aquaman, would be very similar to sort of the critique that I had for Wonder Woman. And that was that some of the story building might have been a little too much. But once the action started going and the characters really kind of became the characters, the movie really picked up and totally made up for, the first 30 minutes or so having maybe just a little too much in there that was a waste. Like, there were some things that could have probably been cut. Like, I don't necessarily know that in Aquaman, I don't know if we needed to see, like, the pregnancy scene and all of that. Like, I get it. You've spent 30 minutes telling me how you met at the lighthouse and fell in love and danced and did all these things. Like, did you really have to go through, like, the pregnancy and small and, like, toddler sort of scenes? Like, I feel like that was too much. You really didn't get anything from that. But again, a little bit of the same thing with Wonder Woman too. Like, maybe in the early days of that, or in the early parts of that movie, they may have gone a little too deep with some of that. But yeah, once the action picks up and things actually start happening, it's awesome. And at least in Wonder Woman, when things are going on, they're explaining to you what's happening in, like, another realm. Whereas in this movie, it was kind of like you're just on the regular planet with regular people. So until you decide to go back to the sea, there's really not a whole heck of a lot going on there.
Yeah, I really enjoyed Aquaman as well. It's probably my favorite DC movie, probably edging out Wonder Woman by just a bit. But my main qualm of it, and I don't know if you picked up on it, because my wife didn't pick up on it either until after I mentioned it to her. They never explain or show Arthur meeting Orm. Arthur was just like, this is where Orm taught me. And then he was just, like, teaching him. They never showed Orm coming to the surface and going to meet Arthur's dad and saying, like, hey, I'm from Atlantis. I knew your wife, and now I want to train your son so that one day he can become the rightful king to Atlantis. He's just like, oh yeah, and this is where he trained me. And then there was just, like, training scenes.
Yeah, I definitely picked up on that. Specifically when he's sort of, like, first in present day, and he lifts the submarine all the way up out of the water, and you're like, okay, well, I guess he knows he has powers, like, because it was kind of like, oh, you have this half-born child, and then all of a sudden, like, we know he's Aquaman, like, we go to the movie to see that, but for him to just step out with this huge, like, display of strength and saving all these people and apparently being called to, like, do good, on Earth and all of that was just kind of out of the blue, especially because you literally spent such a huge amount of time building things up to get to this point. Yeah, there was no, like, oh, let me train you. And it just kind of went into, oh, apparently you've met Atlanteans. So,
well, we knew that before coming into it, because this movie technically takes place after Justice League. So we'd already met Aquaman and known he was like a hero at that point and that he could do stuff. And he had already been to Atlantis and everything. He went to, or not Atlantis, but some like Outrider nation, and had met Mira before and all that stuff to get like the Atlantean armor that he has in Justice League. So we know that he is aware of it. But yeah, like my main issue came from the fact of like, he was just a kid. So unless his dad, like as soon as Arthur could understand it, was like, hey, yeah, your mom was the queen of Atlantis. The sea people came and killed her. You're half Atlantean. Then just having a strange, like, hairbow Willem Dafoe show up and be like, hey, I'm going to train you to swim, and have your dad be like, yeah, sounds good, would just be kind of unnerving.
Yeah, for real. But yeah, great movie. Definitely on par with Wonder Woman. I would say that it probably edges out Wonder Woman for me a little bit as well. I think that it is a hard choice. It's a hard choice, but I enjoyed watching Aquaman more, I do believe.
Yeah.
And it was great. They did a great job with the underwater stuff. That was sort of my big question going into it is, just from a like movie theatrical perspective, are you going to screw it up with the underwater scenes? And they didn't. They did a great job. So second or third thing here is a trailer that I saw, and I'm not sure how many trailers have been out, but this is the first one that I came across, and that was for a movie called Good Boys, which Seth Rogen has something to do with. I'm not sure what. And he produced it. Okay. I didn't know if he produced it or wrote it or directed it or what, but it appears to basically be like Superbad, but with kids that are much younger, like fifth graders instead of, in high school.
Yeah, I did see that. It looks very interesting. I'm curious as to what they're gonna do with it and if audiences respond to that.
Yeah, the reason I knew that Seth Rogen was involved in it was because of the little short that came before the trailer where he was telling the kids that they can't watch their own trailer, that They were okay with shooting the film and allowing them to do all of these things, but they are not allowed to actually watch themselves do it in the trailer.
Right. Yeah, I'm just very curious. Because every time there's like a vulgar kid in a movie, they're usually playing second fiddle to a bigger story. And so I think audiences kind of pass it by as like, oh, wow, that kid has a potty mouth. Ha, ha, ha. But seeing a full movie dedicated to that, I'm just curious as how people are going to respond to it.
Yeah, well, they did make a point in the trailer to say, like, from the people that brought you Sausage Party. So, like, you should know going into it that the same people were in charge of that movie.
Yeah.
So let that manage expectations a little bit.
Right.
All right, what do you have? That's all on my list.
Wow, I am shocked. You had neither of the ones I was expecting you to have on your list.
Well, I know the big one. I'm going to let you cover it.
Is, of course, the new Avengers Endgame trailer, which just came out, which was amazing, kind of gave us more of a hint of what the movie's going to be about, showed us a little more than what we've seen before, some team-ups and everything, confirmed that Tony and Nebula will get back to Earth at some point, confirmed that the Avengers are getting their quantum realm suits and all of this stuff. It doesn't confirm it, but it basically does everything but for letting you know that Hawkeye's family's dead, which is sad. But yeah, it was an extremely good trailer, an extremely well-made trailer, and I'm very excited to watch that one.
Now, do we know that those are quote-unquote quantum suits, or is that just the biggest theory at the moment? Because, I mean, as far as I know, it just looks like matching armor sets.
That's technically the biggest theory at the moment. There hasn't been any like confirmation of it, but it is almost nearly identical, or it looks exactly the same as the suit that Michael Douglas wore when he went into the quantum realm in Ant-Man and the Wasp.
Gotcha. And I know that there was a big leak with a lot of toys, like in China or Taiwan, where they're making them, that actually had characters like dolls and action figures of the characters in that armor. And they may have labeled it as something like that, but I can't recall.
Yeah, I don't know that for certainty either. But yeah, that's the term that's been going around, is like quantum realm, quantum realm, quantum realm. And of course, there's been a lot of like leaked set photos of them going back to like the 2012 Avengers movie and stuff. We've seen them all like wearing their costumes and being in the Battle of New York, except Ant-Man's there now. So the big theory is that they're going to use the quantum realm suits to hop into the quantum realm and use the quantum realm to harness time travel. Which is interesting. I don't, and right now, I think we have enough marketing for the movie. Like, I think the way that we have it now, good. I don't think we need anything else. You can release TV commercials and stuff, basically summarizing the trailers and like Super Bowl commercials that we've gotten so far. But I don't want anything else to come out to potentially spoil any more of the movie than what might potentially already be spoiled just from seeing set photos and stuff, you know?
Oh, yeah, I agree. But you and I are both the type of people that know the moment that we need to stop consuming marketing for something that we want to still be surprised by.
Right.
You know? So it's almost like you're asking for just this once. Can the marketing people actually stop it when it needs to be stopped? But I think they've done a good job of that in the past. I mean, in the last Avengers movie, no one knew what they were walking into.
Yeah, I agree. And it helps a lot releasing the movie around the world on the same day, because then you don't have the like, oh, it's been out for a week in China already. Here's all the spoilers for it because all the Chinese people have already seen it, you know. They release it on the same day around the world, and then it's like, hey, if you want to see it without getting spoiled, come to opening night. And it's like, all right, well, going to opening night.
Because then people like me watch it a week before it hits theaters, but with subtitles in Chinese.
Yeah, and then you're going to be walking into work like, man, you're never going to believe what they do to Captain America. And I'll be like, shut up.
Because I will totally take the hit and listen to Chinese and read English subtitles.
Yeah.
I will totally do that.
Just to know what's going to happen. Well, then moving on to my second one, which was the other one I was very surprised wasn't on your list. James Gunn just got rehired to be the director of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3.
Yes, you're right. That one totally, just when I put my list together, I did not even think about it.
And that one was one that kind of came out of the blue for me. I assumed that Gunn was done, especially because he had been hired by DC to do Suicide Squad. And so when the news came up and I read the articles and it was like, yep, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 will be starting production after Gunn wraps on Suicide Squad, it just kind of blew my mind, because I was like, this is literally the best outcome that we could have hoped for. He was released from Marvel long enough to get a DC movie up and running of a bunch of characters that are Guardians of the Galaxy like, that I'm extremely excited to see. And then he just got rehired to come back to Marvel after he does his DC movie is amazing.
Now, where does that leave us with past James Gunn about to take over the entire franchise, or like the entire MCU?
That I don't know. And that could potentially be another reason why they hired him back, because they, like, Marvel knows kind of what they're doing, and Kevin Feige's the head of everything, but he's not in like storytelling day-to-day meetings, you know what I mean? Whereas like James Gunn could be that hand. So that might be more of the direction they're going for now with him coming back.
So Feige is in the role that James Gunn was going to take?
No, I think that Kevin Feige is in the role of he oversees all the movies, but it's like business meetings and everything like that. It's like money meetings and budget meetings. Whereas I feel like James Gunn would just be, okay, here's the new script for Doctor Strange 3. What do you think? How can it relate to the bigger picture of the MCU overall? Gotcha. And then James Gunn helps with that, knowing like what they're moving forward towards.
Yeah, totally. And that's what I want. I want James Gunn to be the like end all be all, make sure that the arc between every MCU movie is coherent.
Yeah, and I think that's potentially what he's going to be doing. I know he's doing Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, he's doing Suicide Squad first. So Guardians 3 will probably be pushed back. So I'm thinking that we're going to get a couple MCU movies without like the guidance or anything like that, you know, just like some MCU movies adding to their roster before it really starts building up to something big again, more like sequels or singular movies. Like I know that we're getting Black Widow in between that time, and I believe the Doctor Strange sequel in between that time, and then the Eternals, if I'm not mistaken, in between that time as well. But hopefully sooner rather than later, he will be back on Marvel Studios sets and pushing everything forward like it was originally intended. And then the last thing on my list, they just started showing the new adaptation of Pet Semetary to a few critics and everything, and it has been getting rave reviews. People are saying it is one of the best Stephen King adaptations of all time.
Really? I think he's much like a few of those people are, a few of those, I guess, storytellers, is that it's really kind of hit or miss when they make a new movie. So I'm glad to see that this one's getting good reviews because it's by far one of his most popular works.
Right, and I was extremely worried about, the one I was most worried about was the It adaptation, because the miniseries meant so much to me as a kid, and just growing up with like the Tim Curry version of Pennywise and everything, I was like, there's no way they're going to be able to top it in a remake or anything like that. And then of course they did, and now I look to the first movie as the like story that I want to watch when I'm thinking about Pennywise, and hopefully the second one stands up to that as well. And then Pet Semetary following very close behind it. It and Pet Semetary were the two I always used to watch when I was a kid, and I love Pet Semetary and Pet Semetary 2, the originals that came out when we were younger. And so seeing this new one, I was like, I'm excited. I know they just did it with It. I don't know if they're going to be able to do it twice in a row, and apparently it looks like they did.
So are there some of the same people involved in this one that was involved in It?
Not that I know of. There definitely could be. I'm like racking my brain to think if I can think of anything. I don't think so. But now, I mean, this kind of leads towards the discussion we've had a few times, is that there's a giant horror movie resurgence going on right now. And horror movies used to be looked on as just like one step above adult entertainment. But now they're getting big A-listers in, and they're putting in the actual work that any other movie would get. Whereas horror movies didn't used to be that. They would give them $100 and a house and be like, okay, make something scary. We don't care. Use some fishing line and shut some doors, whatever. It'll make $200,000 at the box office. We don't care. And then now it's legitimately like a big market. People are like really turning out for these good horror movies. So I think it's just kind of showing the difference in what horror used to be and kind of the way people view it now.
Well, as long as they keep making movies like Get Out and Us, and you got people like Peele behind the helm that know what they're doing and actually want to make a good horror movie where you have to pay attention and think and not just watch a mindless slasher, then I think you're going to get a wider audience than you have traditionally.
I agree. But that wraps up my halftime this week. I had a lot. We didn't really have that much to get through, but we had points to talk about each of ours together.
Totally. So, quick pitch.
Yeah, let's do it.
I feel like I default to this a lot, but I really don't have a long, quick pitch here for what the Boondock Saints 3 would be. And as I'd mentioned earlier, I hadn't seen the second one in so long, I definitely cannot remember how that one ended to even say how I would want that to play out with a syndicate or anything like that. But in reality, at this point, I just want another one. I want another one with the original two brothers. I think it would be great to get William Dafoe back, because if he is not actually dead in the movies, then that would be fantastic. And I just want to see it done, and I want to see it done right and the way the first one was. In fact, I would love to see, I say this like someone like Tarantino to get their hands on it, even if it's just like a spiritual successor to the Boondock Saints. Like, it's just how bad I want a new entry. And that's it. If they just do it and do it right, keep it small town, maybe make it Philadelphia or Chicago instead of Boston. Maybe they've had to stay low, get out of Dodge to keep a low profile, so they're just continuing their work elsewhere or something like that. I would be cool with it. And that's really a simple ask.
Mine, I go a little bit. It's more of like a plot synopsis really than anything. And I specifically chose this because, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, I don't like what they did with the Syndicate. So what I'm pitching is the Boondock Saints. The McManus brothers get out of prison, and they are now funded by the Syndicate. And the Syndicate's like finding them bad guys. It's like an underground run organization, and the McManus brothers are the face of it. And they're going to towns and doing this stuff. But eventually stuff starts to turn bad. They shoot a guy who the Syndicate has told them to kill. And then it ends up that guy wasn't necessarily bad. He was framed. And the McManus brothers are like, hey, we're not going to keep doing this if you guys are making mistakes. That guy was an innocent person, and we didn't want to kill him. He was framed for something. And the Syndicate's like, honest mistake. So sorry, guys. Won't happen again. And then, they do a few more jobs. And then, of course, it happens again. Something happens. They kill a guy. Turns out they weren't supposed to kill that guy. The Syndicate mixed it up. And then eventually you're going to find out that it's almost a Winter Soldier type scenario, and that the Syndicate this entire time has not just been funded by a group of police officers and whoever getting together and being like, oh yeah, the McManus brothers, let's do it. They're funded by the mob. And the McManus brothers have now become some of the most wanted hitmen for the mob. And so now the Syndicate basically has this army. They've united the mob against the McManus brothers up into the point where they're like, we'll use them and hopefully they don't find out anything. And if they do, we'll just kill them. No problem. And so it's almost going to be the two brothers. Maybe Willem Dafoe makes it out. Maybe when stuff starts going down, he gets shot. And that's how stuff's really about to go down. But I want to see basically the two brothers versus this entire underground organization that they thought were cool that turns out they're actually not. And it's basically not like cops, lawyers, all these people that are in the Syndicate are people that are funded by the mob. So they were only helping the Saints until the mob was like, okay, they know about us, kill them. And so it's the two brothers basically versus an army in all these like small towns across America, small towns, but like Chicago, New York, like all this stuff. And the brothers are like, we've got to clean this up. So it's not just one town, it's a lot, but it's the brothers basically going in and cleaning up the Syndicate members, and they were people that they thought they could trust. Turns out they couldn't, and now they have to fight them to regain who they are as Boondock Saints.
I dig it. I want to see it.
Yeah, that's and that only stemmed from the fact that I don't like that they would be funded by a Syndicate. So
yeah. Make the Syndicate bad.
The Syndicate's bad. They have to fight them. Boondock Saints 4 will be back to basics because now they've already introduced the Syndicate element into it. We have to keep it long enough until we can eradicate it.
Now, I'm assuming that there is just like no plan on the horizon for a third one. I mean, but we haven't heard like the director come out and say it'll never happen or anything like that, have we?
No, the last I heard, he had written or was working on a Boondock Saints 3. And then the last like legitimate news I heard that is coming to my mind right now was that they were going to be developing a Boondock Saints TV series because it made a lot of people scared that Norman Reedus was going to leave The Walking Dead for it. And it was going to be on like FX or something like that. But I think those plans fell through because I haven't heard anything after the initial like, oh, this is something that's in the works.
Gotcha.
So could still be coming, could be coming any day now. We could wake up tomorrow and they're like, hey, Boondock Saints 3 starts production next month. And we're like, oh, what? But, you never know.
I hope I'll wake up to that news one day.
Well, I guess that about wraps us up for this episode of the Scruffy Movies podcast. We hope you guys enjoyed it. We hope you enjoyed your St. Patrick's Day. Hopefully this helped add a little bit to the celebration, kind of kept you in the St. Patrick's Day mood after you celebrated either Saturday or Sunday. And we hope you guys enter the Mission Impossible Fallout digital code giveaway. If you would like to enter that, just comment on the YouTube video below the keyword cruise. Man, my mouth is like not going along with what my brain wants it to say. If you want to enter the Mission Impossible giveaway, please enter the code word cruise below in the YouTube video you're currently watching, or send me a direct message on Instagram at Scruffy Movies. Again, the code word is cruise. You'll be entered to win a free digital copy of Mission Impossible Fallout. Please follow us on Instagram at Scruffy Movies.
And Crockalicious.
Thank you guys for listening. We hope you have a great week, and we can't wait to see you next week for another really good episode, one that I'm excited about, of the Scruffy Movies podcast.
Bye.